Hey everyone, welcome back to Taylor Timepieces, your home for everything watches, luxury, and style. Whether you're just starting out or further along on your collection journey, or if you're looking to brush up on some lingo, today we're diving into common watch terms every collector should know. Let's break down the jargon and make horology simple again. So, first to illustrate this, we have a very interesting piece that we actually sold over the weekend. This is the Bell & Ross Aero Naval, and we're just going to be utilizing it to discuss the parts of the watch. So you have here, first up is the case. And the case is the metal casing, which can also be a precious metal, whether that be gold, but in this case it's stainless steel. It is that piece of metal that is housing the movement. It houses the dial and the crystal. Cases come in many shapes and sizes, and you have things like the cushion case, the tonneau case, and of course the round circular case. As I mentioned, they can be made of stainless steel, titanium, rose gold, even ceramic in some cases. To further illustrate that, you have again the stainless steel case right here. This is the casing on the watch. Then you have something called the crystal. There are three main types of crystal. You have the acrylic. It is cheap, it is prone to scratching, but it's very easy to replace and polish. So that is why you might gravitate towards an acrylic crystal on a watch, because especially if it's like a vintage piece, you want to be able to replace that crystal rather easily. And that crystal can be replaced for under $100 to make it look great, and essentially to, change something like that out. It's not perfect, but it does do a great job. You then have something like a sapphire. Now, the sapphire, I would say, is the collector's favorite. It very rarely scratches. I would say it is nearly scratch-proof, and I think it's just super clear. I mean, something like this, it does have that sapphire case, and it is not shatterproof. So, I mean, if you drop it or scrape it or something like that, it will show those scratches. But in general, any surface scratches will not appear on that sapphire case. You also have that third thing, which is that mineral case. That mineral case is more scratch resistant. It's kind of that middle ground between the acrylic and the sapphire, but it's not perfect. It can still, it can still gather scratches, surface level scratches, things like that. And now that we've spoken about the case and the crystal, it's important to talk about the movement types on watches. Now, there are, of course, several different movements in watches. It is the heart of the watch. Think of if your watch is a person, this movement is the heart of the watch. It's what makes it tick. It usually, in this specific example, you can see it through something called an exhibition. So this is an exhibition case back. You can see that movement, and there are a couple different movements that come with your watch. You have a quartz watch, which is battery powered, but it is actually functionally more accurate than a watch that may include a different movement, something like a mechanical movement. It's powered by a mainspring and it's wound by hand. So if you're looking at something like a Speedmaster Sapphire Sandwich, we actually recently sold one of those as well. Those need to be wound by hand. Now, of course, then you have that third thing, which is an automatic movement. Now, that is still a mechanical movement. However, it uses the motion in your wrist and the momentum to keep that watch wound. That's something that you can wind, I would say, anywhere from 40 to 80 times, and it will keep time rather accurately. A special tool that we use a lot to not have to continuously wind a watch is, with an automatic movement, is of course a watch winder. That is a tool that you could put your watch on, and essentially it runs in a circular centripetal motion, so that you are able to take the watch off very easily and put it on your wrist without needing to set the time as you would with, let's say, a quartz watch, or in some cases a mechanical watch. You can also hear about different calibers. Usually that's just a fancy word for a specific type of movement. So you have the Valjules movement and different, movements in each watch. So it's just getting more specific to the watch and the brand itself. But for the purposes of this, I would say beginner video, you don't necessarily need to know the calibers and different movements in that regard. Of course, once you get past the basic stuff, it's really important to know the details on the dial. So, of course, you have things like the indices. As many of you should know, there are, of course, markers on the clock. If you have a clock in your house, if you have a analog clock in your house, the parts that show the numerals or the hour markers, these are indices. They can be, in some cases, Roman, in some cases, Arabic, all different types of basically hour markers can show up. These are all indices on the watch. You can have something like a printed indices, something like an applied indices, and it just kind of shows up in something like this. To see. So if you see here, you have the 12 and the 3 and the 6 and the 9. These are all indices. Of course, and in order to point to these indices, you have something called the hands. Now, of course, we all know that the hands of the watch are probably the most important part of a analog watch, because they are able to tell you what time it is. You have different styles. You have the Delphine style hands. You have sword hands, baton hands. In some cases, if you look at a Yachtmaster with the gold, the 116680, you have the Mercedes hands. Mercedes hands is something, again, like I said, like on a Yachtmaster or Submariner. And the interesting thing about these hands is in some cases they glow, and that is called lume. And what lume refers to is the glowing material applied to the hands and indices for more visibility after dark. So in a lot of cases, field watches or other aquatic style watches like a Submariner, a couple other pieces, they will need to have this lume in order to be able to tell time in the dark. So, it's something that was, when they first came into existence, something that was really helpful to the functionality of the piece, because they wanted, when watches were used more as functional pieces and not necessarily fashion statements, you needed to have that lume in order to be able to tell the time in the dark, whether you were at work late or whether you were, out in the field, hence the term a field watch. And of course, there are complications. Now, complications is just a fancy word of saying, hey, what does this watch do? So you have complications such as a date and a chronograph and a moon phase and a GMT. This particular watch here, this Bell & Ross, does have that GMT function, and we call that a complication. A lot of times, especially with the older folks, when we talk about complications, they think something is wrong with the watch. That is not the case. A complication, as I said, is just a fancy way of saying, here is what's going on with this watch and with this item. Of course, you have what you put your watch on. So when it comes to straps, you have something like this. This is a stainless steel link bracelet. So as you can see, it is stainless, it is sturdy, but of course that's not the only thing that you could put a watch on. You could put a watch on a oyster strap, which is very, very much like it refers to the links on the watch. That's usually a little bit more sporty, or you can put it on a Jubilee strap. Now the Jubilee is essentially, it's a little dressier. So if you look at like a Bat girl, comes in that Jubilee bracelet, which of course is that dressier bracelet, and the Batman comes on the oyster bracelet, and that is of course a more sporty bracelet for the 116710 BLNR Rolex, which is, as we all know, colloquially discussed as the Batman or the Batgirl due to its purplish blue and black color scheme. Now you of course have all these different things. You have NATO straps. They are military inspired, and they're usually made out of nylon. And also you have clasp. So if you have something, you have a deployment clasp. This is something that I see a lot of people mispronounce. It's not a deployment clasp. Deployment is what you do in the military. A deployment clasp is essentially, it's got these buttons on the side, which you do have here in this Bell & Ross, and you can essentially open it up, versus something like a buckle where you would have to put the piece of the buckle through the loop in order to fit the watch on your wrist. And of course, when it comes to collectors, they love their slang. You have things like the patina. We sell a lot of patinaed watches when it comes to the vintage pieces that we sell. And all that patina really is that aged finish that develops over time, especially on, as I said, vintage pieces. If you look at vintage Rolex or you look at a vintage Omega, they tend to patina very well. You have something that's called a beater. It's a watch that you would wear every day, and you don't really baby it. So in a perfect world, a Submariner 16610 would be a beater. It's a watch that I can put on, and I'm not necessarily worried about scratching it up or putting a little bit of wear on it, because hey, that's how it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be a everyday watch that you're comfortable with. Now, a gold AP or a gold Submariner is not a beater. That is a piece that you wear for a specific purpose, and it's heavier, and it's a watch. I mean, it could be a beater if you do have a more expensive collection, but the term beater is essentially just any watch that you can wear every day and you don't want to baby it. You're okay with it getting scratched up and dinged up. NOS is essentially new old stock, so a lot of times we'll get something like that in where, hey, it's not a recent date on the card, but it's been sitting in someone's safe and they recently found it. A lot of times with the office, we'll have people come in and they'll say, hey, my dad passed away and we found this watch in his safe and it hasn't been worn since the early 90s, or it hasn't been looked at since the late 80s, and if it's in very clean shape, we would call that new old stock. So it's something, again, the emphasis there is that it's never been worn, and that it could be a vintage watch, so it doesn't have to necessarily be a new date, but new old stock is very interesting. I think people throw on that term quite a bit when it's like, hey, it's not quite brand new, but it doesn't have a lot of wear. It's important to know the difference. I mean, you can have, in some cases, a 2020, 2021, Oyster Perpetual, if it's been discontinued and sitting in someone's safe, that can be considered new old stock. But usually 9 times out of 10, if something's had at least one owner and more than one owner, then I wouldn't consider it new old stock. Unless, of course, we get that piece in. We've had situations where maybe someone will buy a piece from us brand new, straight from the factory, and it's a 2025, and they will wear that watch for maybe a week and decide that that's not for them. It's had very minimal risk time, and then we can classify it as new old stock. But it is a very thin line, and it's really up to the collector's discretion. But I think for the most part, people have a very concrete description of what it might be. A Grail is that ultimate dream watch, and we've done some videos on Grails in the past. So for me, my Grail would probably be a Sky Dweller, or rather a Sky Dweller or Day Date. I really love the Day Date olive dial with a white gold bezel. It doesn't necessarily mean a watch that you can just afford, but it's a watch that you can keep in rotation. Even though I can, quote unquote, afford a $30,000 watch, can I afford it comfortably and not worry about my other expenses? At this moment in my life, no. I think that your Grail changes. When I first started watch collecting, my Grail was that Panerai 911. And I was really glad to have a piece that was, $10,000 plus in my collection, and that's going to stay in my permanent collection for the rest of my life. But of course, now a $10,000 watch doesn't have that certain gravitas that it had for me when I first started watch collecting. So, that Grail moves up. Once I can collect and successfully hold on to that Day Date, Grail for me might be a certain Patek or a certain RM. We don't know. Again, it's totally okay for a Grail to continuously be moving as you progress in your watch collecting journey. And of course, back to these nicknames that we have. We had talked about the Batman when we talked about the Jubilee and the Oyster bracelet, but that Batman is that Rolex with the blue and black bezel. Then you have the Pepsi, that is that Rolex with the red and blue bezel, and of course the root beer, that's kind of that brown and gold bezel. Now, all different brands, it's not just Rolex that does these nicknames. You have the AP Vampire, which is the black, fully blacked out AP Vampire, Audemars Piguet with a with red outlining. That's why they call it the Vampire, because it's black and red. You have the tag Monaco Dark Lord, which we just got recently, and that's a fully blacked out tag. They call it the Dark Lord because it does have a bit of a Star Wars aesthetic to it. And yeah, as I said, there are nicknames for every single watch. We'll go over those as we progress through this channel, but it's just something that I wanted to go over with you guys today, to just get a bit of a quick crash course in watch vocabulary, which, to me, I deal with every day, but for some other people, they may not know. So I guess my question to you is this one, and that would be, which ones are terms that you did not know? Which ones are your favorite? I would comment below, and if there are any terms that I missed that you think would be beneficial for our other viewers and subscribers to learn and know about, so that when they're collecting watches, they're well informed, please leave that in the comments below as well. Like and subscribe and hit that bell so that you never miss another beat, or in some cases a tick of watch news. And until next time, I really appreciate you guys giving us a listen. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.